The air had thickened without warning. One moment, the Harbinger sailed through the swirling azure currents with the hum of her engines and the creak of rigging filling the decks. The next, an unnatural stillness descended, swallowing every sound as if the very sky above had sealed its lips. Captain Rourke's sharp eyes narrowed as the sunlight dimmed behind a vast shroud of grey mist, the kind that seemed to swallow light whole. All hands, prepare for unusual conditions. Rourke's voice cut through the eerie, quiet, steady and firm. The crew paused, the usual cacophony of a skyship's life, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed in from every direction. Lyra Venn stood on the navigation platform, her fingers trembling slightly as she scanned the instruments. The compass spun erratically, and the communication devices emitted only static. "Captain, all frequencies are dead. It's like the storms swallowed our voices," she reported, her green eyes reflecting a flicker of unease. Joran Malik, the engineer, cursed under his breath as he pounded the control panel. No power fluctuation, no mechanical failure. This silence, it's unnatural. Something's wrong with the currents themselves. Below deck, the crew gathered as whispers of fear stirred. The silence was deafening, an oppressive force that seemed to mute even the beating of their own hearts. The Harbinger drifted like a ghost ship, caught in a tempest that roared without sound. Captain Rourke paced the bridge, his jaw clenched. This isn't just a storm, it's the curse manifesting. The ghost Helm's shadow is long, and it reaches far. First Mate Dowland stepped forward, voice low but steady. "We hold together, Captain. This silence can't break us." Ira, the enigmatic passenger, watched from the shadows, her pale face serene yet inscrutable. When finally she spoke, her voice was a whisper that seemed to echo in the stillness. "The storm feeds on fear and division. Unity is your shield." The crew exchanged wary glances, the weight of her words settling among them. Rourke's gaze hardened with renewed purpose. "Then we stand as one. No fear, no doubt. Bring the Harbinger through this silence, or we perish in it." Hours stretched inside the clammy mist. The air grew cold, and spectral lights flickered at the edges of the ship, like distant lanterns swaying in an unseen breeze. Lyra's hands steadied on the controls, tracing the faintest currents beneath the quiet. Joran coordinated with the engine room, keeping the ship's heart beating despite the lack of external guidance. Voices rose in a fragile chorus, a shared determination that wove a fragile tapestry of hope. The crew's unity became a beacon against the oppressive silence, and slowly, imperceptibly, the Harbinger edged forward. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the silence broke. A gust of wind tore through the masts, and distant thunder rumbled like a returning heartbeat. The mist thinned, revealing a sky touched by the first light of dusk. Captain Rourke exhaled, the tension easing but not vanishing. "We've survived the silent tempest, but the curse grows stronger. We must be ready." Lyra nodded, her eyes meeting his with a mix of respect and renewed trust. "Together, Captain." As the Harbinger sailed onward into the uncertain skies, the crew braced for the trials yet to come. Bound by the silent storm's lesson, only unity could shield them from the curse's deepening shadow. But somewhere deep in the swirling currents, unseen eyes watched hand. The tempest was far from over. The Harbinger had become a vessel caught not only in the treacherous airborne currents between the submerged islands, but also in the growing shadow of the ghost Helm's curse. Captain Rourke stood resolute, his hand firm on the helm as a stifling silence wrapped the ship like a shroud. The silence was unnatural, a void where sound itself seemed to be swallowed. This was no ordinary storm. It was a tempest of silence, a cruel test of the crew's mettle and the captain's regained command. The crew moved with cautious precision. Lyra Ven's fingers danced over the navigation instruments, her face pale but determined. Joran Malik's usual sharp tongue was muffled by concentration as he inspected the ship's systems. The mysterious passenger, Ira, watched from the shadows, her piercing gaze unblinking and unreadable. Communication lines went dead, compasses spun erratically, and the very air grew heavy with anticipation. The Harbinger was isolated, a lone ship adrift in a silent tempest, where the only sounds were the crew's measured breaths and the creaking timbers strained by unseen forces. Rourke's voice was the anchor in the growing unease. "Hold fast, trust in each other. We've faced worse storms and come through. This silence will break if we stand together." The crew's fears simmered beneath the surface, but Rourke's unwavering presence steeled their resolve. As the spectral lights flickered and the weight of the curse pressed closer, the Harbinger pressed onward, borne by the fragile thread of unity and the captain's hard-won command. The silent tempest was not merely a storm, it was a crucible, and the Harbinger and her crew would either emerge stronger or be consumed by the curse that haunted their skies. The chapter closes with the ship emerging from the silent storm, battered but unbroken, as the crew prepares to face the next shadow looming on their path. The curse's grip tightens, but so does their unity, setting the stage for the trials yet to come. The dense mist clung to the hull of the Harbinger as it drifted closer to the island's jagged shore, a spectral veil muffling the creak of wood and the whisper of canvas. Captain Rourke stood at the prow, eyes narrowed against the damp chill that clung to the air like a shroud. The island lay before them, a silhouette of twisted trees and cragged rock, its shores swallowed by an unnatural fog that seemed alive with murmurs. "This place," Rourke muttered, "is no ordinary refuge. I can feel it in the bones of the air." Lyra, standing beside him, with a map clenched in one hand and her keen gaze scanning the horizon, nodded grimly. "The currents around this isle are erratic-like. The island itself resists our presence. Yet, it's the closest haven we have. We need answers, and if the Helm's curse is tied to these waters, this might be where the truth waits." The crew busied themselves with preparations as the Harbinger's anchor bit into the soil beneath the shifting mists. Marek tightened his grip on a wrench, his jaw set as he watched the swirling fog with distrust. Celine, enigmatic as ever, paced near the ship's rail, her dark robes fluttering in the chill wind, eyes reflecting the restless shadows. Stepping onto the island was like crossing into another realm. The mist coiled around their ankles, thick and whispering, voices teasing the edges of hearing half-formed words, sighs of ancient sorrow. The trees loomed overhead, gnarled limbs twisting like arthritic fingers, their leaves rustling in a soundless breeze. It was a place where silence spoke louder than shouts. "Stay close," Rourke commanded, his voice low. "We don't know what spirits linger here." They moved cautiously through the underbrush, the ground soft beneath their boots, muffled by moss and fallen leaves. Lyra's eyes caught a glimmerous stone monolith rising from the earth, covered in ancient runes that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light. Lanterns were raised, their flames flickering against the carved symbols. Rourke stepped forward, tracing the runes with a gloved finger. "These markings, they tell a story." Lyra leaned in, her fingers deftly tracing the patterns, murmuring translations learned from old texts. An ancient pact made between the submerged rulers and a power bound to the Helm. The curse is no accident, it's a chain forged long ago to control the skies and seas. A hush fell over the group as the weight of the revelation settled. The helm was not merely a cursed artifact, but a linchpin in a centuries-old scheme crafted to bind and dominate. The implications rippled through their minds, stirring doubts and fears. Merrick's sharp voice broke the silence as he confronted Celine, suspicion flaring in his eyes. "You knew more about this place than you've let on. What are you hiding?" Selena's gaze met his with a cold, unreadable expression. "I carry my own chains, engineer. The helm's curse touches all who sail these skies, whether they know it or not. Trust is a scarce commodity here." Tempers flared briefly before reason tempered the discord. They set up camp beneath the twisted canopy, the firelight casting long, flickering shadows that seemed to dance with the whispered voices carried on the wind. The island's secrets pressed close, threading through the night air and settling into their bones. Rourke stared into the flames, the faces of his crew reflecting in the wavering light. Each bore scars, some visible, others etched deep within. The path ahead promised no mercy, but turning back was no longer an option. The Island of Whispers had spoken, and with it, the helm's dark legacy grew clearer. Redemption awaited on a knife's edge, sharpened by the truths unearthed beneath the haunted boughs. As the whispers swelled around them, rising into a swell of sound that was almost a voice, Rourke clenched his fists. "We carry more than a cursed helm," he thought. "We carry the weight of a world's forgotten sins, and we must see this through, or be lost to the silence forever." The night deepened, and with it, the island's secrets stirred. Somewhere beyond the mist, something watched, waiting. The journey was far from over, and the shadows that clung to the ghost helm would challenge them all. But for now, the crew of the Harbinger was bound together by whispered truths and unspoken fears, ready to face whatever dawn might bring or what darkness might claim them first. As the fire's glow flickered low, a sudden, distant echo of voice rose on the wind, carrying a warning that chilled Rourke's blood and set his heart racing. The island was alive with more than memories. It was a sentinel of secrets, and the next revelation was only moments away. The sky above the submerged world darkened swiftly, as if the very heavens were closing in on the Harbinger. Captain Rourke stood at the helm, his gaze sharp and unyielding, watching the churning maelstrom of airborne currents that twisted like serpents between the submerged islands. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and salt, a harbinger of the violent storm brewing ahead. "Hold steady," Rourke commanded, his voice cutting through the rising wind. Beside him, Myra's fingers flew over the navigation instruments, her brows furrowed in concentration. The young navigator's past haunted her still, the memory of a failed course that had cost lives. But now she channeled every ounce of her skill into steering the Harbinger through the perilous sky. "Captain, the currents ahead are unlike anything I've charted," Myra warned, her voice tense. "They twist and turn, unpredictably, like the sea itself is alive, angry." Rourke nodded grimly. "Then we'll navigate them as best we can. The helm must reach its destination." Below deck, Gideon was wrestling with the ship's aging machinery. The Harbinger groaned under the strain, the engine sputtering as if protesting the cruel winds. Sparks flew from the engine room's grates, and the sharp clang of metal echoed through the ship's frame. "Blast this cursed weather," Gideon muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "These currents are tearing us apart." A sudden lurch sent the ship tilting dangerously, the wooden deck creaking ominously. Crew members scrambled to secure riggings and brace themselves. The ghost helm, secured in the captain's quarters, seemed to hum faintly, its dark energy weaving into the storm's fury. On the deck, Eli's stood near the prow, eyes closed as the wind whipped their silver hair. A serene smile touched their lips, as if they heard secrets whispered on the gale. Their presence was an enigma to the crew, neither fully trusted nor understood, yet undeniably vital to the voyage. Eli's Rourke called over the roar of the wind. "What do you sense?" The passenger's eyes opened, glowing faintly amber. The currents are restless, stirred by forces beyond mere weather. The Helm's curse awakens them. A shiver ran through the crew. The supernatural weight of their cargo was no longer a mere tale. It was a palpable force twisting the very air around them. Myra's voice broke through the tension. "Captain, if we don't adjust our course now, the vortex ahead will tear us apart." Rourke's fingers tightened on the wheel. "Do it." The Harbinger veered sharply, battling the violent gusts. The ship shuddered, the sails straining as the crew fought to keep her aloft. Mira's keen eye caught a sudden shift, a hidden current beneath the main flow, a narrow path weaving through the chaos. "This way," she shouted, pointing towards a slender gap in the storm. Trusting her instinct, Rourke adjusted the sails, and the ship dove gracefully into the narrow passage. The roar of the storm faded slightly, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against the crew's nerves. In the quiet, whispers seemed to curl round the ship, voices half heard on the wind. The ghost helm's influence thickened, seeping into the minds of those aboard, stirring fears and doubts. "Steady, everyone," Rourke urged. "Focus on the task. We've come too far to falter now." Gideon emerged from the engine room, face smudged with soot but eyes bright. "Engines holding, for now. But that curse's grip is getting stronger." Eli's nodded solemnly. "The currents feed on fear. We must not give them more." The crew, united by necessity, worked in synchrony. Rourke's leadership, Mira's navigation, Gideon's engineering, and Ellis's mysterious insight combined to keep the Harbinger sailing through the deadly currents. Yet beneath their efforts lurked a growing tension. The curse was no longer just a legend. It was a shadow that threatened to unravel them all. As the Harbinger emerged from the storm's heart, battered but unbroken, Rourke allowed himself a fleeting glance at the cursed helm locked away below. The journey had only just begun, and the true test of their resolve was yet to come. "What lies ahead?" Rourke murmured. "Only the winds can tell." But the winds whispered of darker days, and the crew's fragile trust was a candle flickering in an unforgiving gale. The dim glow of twilight bled through the portholes of the Harbinger, casting long shadows across the worn wood of the captain's quarters. Captain Rourke sat heavily in his chair, eyes locked onto the ghost helm resting ominously upon its pedestal. The artifact pulsed with a faint, unnatural light that seemed to breathe in the silence, its surface shifting like liquid shadow. Tendrils of darkness crept from its edges, stretching and curling across the floorboards like smoky fingers reaching for something unseen. Rourke's jaw tightened as the shadows danced in the flickering candlelight. He could feel the weight of the cursed helm pressing not just upon the ship, but into the very souls of his crew. The legends had spoken of this, how the helm's curse was not merely misfortune, but a living entity that fed on fear and suspicion. He rubbed a hand over his stubbled chin, trying to steel himself against the gnawing dread that settled like fog in his chest. "Captain," a voice whispered at the door. It was Alara, her silhouette outlined by the faint corridor light. She stepped inside, eyes sharp and wary, her expression tight with unease. "The crew is restless. Shadows have been seen moving in the lower decks. Marek says it's nonsense, but I heard voices whispers that no one else seems to catch." Rourke gestured to the helm. "It's more than nonsense. The helm's curse is waking. We need to keep the crew united, or this ship will tear itself apart before we reach the island." Ilara's eyes flicked toward the helm and then back to Rourke. Do you think the curse is real? Or is it just fear playing tricks on us? Before Rourke could answer, the door banged open again, and Marek stormed in, his face flushed with frustration. Fear. It's superstition. This cursed trinket is nothing but old sailors' tales. We have real problems, mechanical failures, dwindling supplies. We can't afford to waste time chasing shadows. Tension crackled between the three like static electricity. Marek's skepticism clashed with Elaros' unease, and Rourke found himself caught between the two. The helm pulsed again, darker shadows writhing across its surface. That night, as the Harbinger sailed through the starless sky, shadows crept along the corridors below deck. Whispered voices teased the edges of hearing, slipping between conversations and stirring unease. Ilara patrolled the halls, her hand never far from the dagger at her waist. She caught Marek in a dim passage, his eyes darting nervously. You don't believe me, do you? She demanded, voice low. I believe we're all tired, Marek snapped back. Tired of this cursed voyage and your tales of ghosts and curses. Their argument was cut short by a sudden chill that swept the corridor, and both froze as a shadow flickered past a shape too quick and insubstantial to grasp. Marek's face paled. Fine, he muttered. Maybe there's something here, but it won't break me. Meanwhile, Silas, the mysterious passenger who had spoken little since boarding, vanished from his cabin under cover of a swirling mist that seemed to seep from the helm itself. The crew whispered in hushed tones about his strange comings and goings, suspicion growing like wild ivy around his shadowy figure. On the deck, under the oppressive darkness of the clouded sky, Rourke found Silas standing alone, his face obscured. Why do you hide in shadows? Rourke asked, voice steady but edged with frustration. Silas smiled faintly, eyes gleaming. Because the shadows are where the truth resides, Captain. The helm calls to me as it does to all, but my path is my own. A sudden gust rattled the rigging, and Silas vanished into the night, leaving Rourke with more questions than answers. Back below, the crew gathered in the mess hall, voices rising in heated debate. Accusations flew who was sabotaging the ship, who was under the helm's sway. The shadows seemed to pulse with malevolent life, pressing against the walls as if listening. Fear twisted every word, every glance exchanged. We can't trust each other, Ilara said, voice trembling. The helm's curse is breaking us. Rourke slammed a fist on the table, commanding silence. Enough. This ship is our home, and we survive by standing together. The curse wants us divided. We will not give it that victory. But even as he spoke, a creeping doubt settled in his heart. The helm's shadow had taken root not just on the ship, but in the minds and hearts of those aboard. The question gnawed at him. Could he hold the crew together long enough to see this through? Or would the ghost helm doom them all? The Harbinger sailed onward into the night, its fate entwined with the shadows that now haunted every corner, every soul aboard. The Harbinger sailed quietly above the submerged ruins, the water beneath the ship ablaze with a ghostly luminescence. The sunken city stretched out in a sprawling tableau of coral-covered spires and collapsed domes, each structure shimmering faintly as bioluminescent flora clung to the ancient stones. The crew gathered at the railings, their faces pale in the eerie blue-green glow, eyes wide with a mixture of reverence and dread. Captain Rourke stood among them, the weight of his past failures pressing heavily on his shoulders, yet his gaze was steady as it traced the outlines of the drowned metropolis. "What is this place?" murmured one of the deckhands, his voice barely carrying over the gentle creak of the ship's timbers. Mira stepped forward, her fingers brushing the worn leather of her satchel as she unfolded a set of ancient charts. "This is the lost city of Eloria," she said quietly, her voice laced with both awe and caution. "Once the heart of the submerged world, its people were said to control the celestial currents and maintain balance between sea and sky. But their pride led to ruin." Rourke's eyes narrowed, and the ghost Helm, Miros, gaze flickered to the helm, secured in the captain's quarters below deck. Legends say it belonged to Eloria's final captain, an artifact bound by a pact with the elemental forces. It was meant to protect the city's secrets, but the price was a curse that doomed any ship carrying it. Below deck, Elric worked silently, the soft hum of tools and the faint scent of oil filling the cramped space. He held a small, strange artifact retrieved from the city's depths, its surface alive with subtle pulses of light. His fingers traced the intricate carvings, and a sudden chill ran through him. The artifact thrummed with a malevolent energy, tangible and oppressive. "This isn't just superstition," he muttered, glancing toward the helm locked away in the cabinet. "There's something here, something alive in the curse." Up on deck, the mysterious passengers stood at the ship's prow, their eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the glowing city. Their voice, low and resonant, carried a weight that silenced the surrounding chatter. "The pact was forged in desperation," they intoned, "to guard knowledge that could unravel the balance of our world. The curse is a chain, binding the helm and its bearer to an eternal vigil. To carry it is to accept a burden far greater than death." Rourke stepped forward, his voice steady despite the unease tightening his chest. "Then what choice do we have? If this curse is a chain, how do we break it? And what happens if we fail?" The passenger's eyes met his, inscrutable as the depths below. "That is the question that will decide your fate." As night deepened, the Harbinger drifted slowly over the city, the glowing ruins casting long shadows that danced across the water's surface. The knowledge gained here was a double-edged sword, a beacon of hope and a harbinger of doom. The crew retreated into their quarters, minds heavy with the revelations, each haunted by the shadows of the past and the uncertain path ahead. Captain Rourke stood alone on the deck, staring into the depths. The last light of the sunken city flickered beneath him, a fragile glow in an endless sea of darkness. The curse of the Ghost Helm was no mere legend, it was a living force, entwined with the fate of the submerged world and all who dared to challenge its secrets. And as the currents whispered their ancient songs, Rourke knew the true test was only just beginning. The wind stirred, carrying with it the faintest echo of a warning, one he could neither ignore nor escape. The Harbinger pressed onward into the unknown.